I've had this question. Should red state voters be blamed for their politicians' deadly mistakes, like what happened in the Texas floods? It might be controversial, but I'm here to say yes, especially since so many paying the price for these mistakes aren't even able to vote. See, in politics, the saying goes, the fish rots from the head down. That is, unless the fish's tail is also rotting, in which case it's kind of a putrid cat-dog type situation. And this head-to-ass rot is exactly what's been happening inside the entire Republican Party when it comes to preventing Americans from dying in climate disasters.
False reporting, fake news.
Who's to blame? That's the word choice of losers.
Because the colossal failures surrounding the recent Texas floods, which cost the lives of 135 people and counting, are a perfect distillation of everything that is wrong with not just right-wing policy decisions, but the economic decisions and overall right-wing ideology of low taxes and rugged individualism. And it's not just on politicians, but let's keep it real, voters too.
This is Texas, and Texans can take care of Texas.
I'm going to take you into every level of this epic failure, which includes the most Texan characters like a redheaded girlfriend, a guy named Buster Baldwin who can't sleep, a pregnant wife named Tweety, Sleepy Joe as a savior, and way too many football analogies. Tuck in. In the middle of the night of July 4th, an auspicious start, about 70 people, including 27 campers at a Christian girls' camp called Camp Mystic, died. A storm dropped around 9 inches of rain in just a few hours, which is a whole summer's worth of rain for Texas, and it caused the Guadalupe River to rise 20 feet within 3 hours. Campers by the river even filmed cabins being washed away.
There's people in it.
Oh my God, there's so many people in it. Please tell me you're getting this on video. Yeah, camp's over.
That is terrifying, but also, did you hear the kid at the end there say, yeah, camp's over?
Yeah, camp's over.
That is the most relatable teen reaction about your sleepaway camp being destroyed. There were too many mosquitoes anyway. Your camp crush just turned you down, and you're pretty sure hell doesn't exist, so what's with all this praying? What's been happening in the aftermath of the flood is effectively a 5-way Spider-Man pointing meme, where every level of government is blaming the other. Funny though, unlike the wildfires in Los Angeles, no one blamed DEIA. I mean, especially given who the governor is. A, of course, is for asshole, and we'll get to him later. Let's start with the person who wastes no time getting in front of the cameras, except for the 2 hours it takes her to get into her villain drag, Kristi Noem, who is the head of the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Homeland Security, for some reason, oversees FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration. It seems like on the night of July 4th and through the weekend, FEMA wasn't picking up the phone.
Does that concern you that only 15% of calls were answered? These are people in a desperate state. FEMA often the first call that they make, only 15% were answered on July 7th, several days after the floods.
These contracts were in place and those people were in those call centers and they were picking up the phone and answering these calls from these individuals. So that report needs to be validified. I'm not certain it's accurate, and I'm not sure where it came from. And the individuals who are giving you information out of FEMA, I'd love to have them put their names behind it because...
Because why? What are you gonna do? Send FEMA officials to Alligator Alcatraz? Do it, because it's already flooding. They need the help. Also, the reporting needs to be validified? That's not a word, but look, when you're made up mostly of forever chemicals, it's an easy mistake. 2/3 of the calls placed to FEMA were reportedly never answered because hundreds of contractors who would have answered the calls were fired on July 5th. Their contracts hadn't been renewed, and no one thought, gee, maybe we should extend them just a wee bit longer. The other thing that happened is that FEMA's funds for rescue crews weren't released immediately. You see, when there's a national emergency, the urban search and rescue crews of FEMA get to work. But under a new directive by the dog killer with too much face filler, any operating expense over $100,000 had to be approved by her personally. One longtime FEMA official told CNN, "We were operating under a clear set of guidance, lean forward, be prepared, anticipate what the state needs, and be ready to deliver it. That is not as clear of an intent for us at the moment." So being ready for an emergency was not the clear intent of the Federal Emergency Management Fund. It's more of a last port of call fund now. If FEMA were an emergency contact, it'd be the mother of your ex-boyfriend. She's there, but she's drunk. And Kristi Noem didn't approve the funds for rescue teams to be deployed until Monday, July 7th, a full 72 hours after the flood. She was busy, you guys, because on Sunday, July 6th, she had to post 3 horse girl portraits of herself on Instagram, asking her followers, which one do you like for the official governor's portrait to hang in the South Dakota state capitol? How about the one where the horse is slowly walking you into the sea? Do you have one of those? But Kristi Noem is not alone, of course. She's acting in the direction of the regime. And Trump, just like he has USAID and the Department of Education, has FEMA on the chopping block. Noem's role, like Marco Rubio's and Linda McMahon's of DOE, is to destroy the very agencies they helm, while somehow sparing their own salaries. So when FEMA Director Cameron Hamilton said,
I do not believe it is in the best interest of the American people to eliminate the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
He was fired. And FEMA's new director is a guy who's very much on board for the job of eliminating FEMA. He's used to blowing things up. He's a former artillery officer in the Marines, David Richardson, who looks like what happens when you're carrying the weight of your war crimes in Iraq all the way to the grave. A guy who told FEMA staff that if they get in the way of his kamikaze mission, he will run them right over. And a guy who, unsurprisingly, has absolutely no emergency response experience. In June at a FEMA staff meeting, he said he had no idea hurricane season existed, which is a great way to avoid responsibility for doing your job. Okay, look, as the ambassador to Costa Rica, I truly did not know that Costa Rica was a country. I thought it was more of an expression, you know, when you like the finer things. He really enjoys the Costa Rica of life, or she went full Costa Rica, you know, with anyone else? I can't be the only one. David Richardson only visited the affected areas in Texas a whopping 8 days after the flood. But go easy. He likely had to make a pit stop at his girlfriend's place and miscalculated the time it would take to get there. And that might sound like a joke, but is it? Because according to leaked meeting notes released by DropSite, Richardson was in the middle of explaining that states like Texas are really good at handling disasters, and then said this. You know, some states are pretty good at this. The other day, I was chatting with my girlfriend. She's from Texas. She's got like huge red hair, like she's from Texas. And I said something, and she said, well, you know, oh, I know what it was. I said, how come it takes so long to drive 10 hours from Galveston to Amarillo? And she said, well, you know, Texas is bigger than Spain. I didn't know that. So I looked at the map. Texas is huge. I mean, if you put it in the middle of Europe, it takes up most of Europe. However, they do disaster recovery very, very well. The FEMA director looked at a map, and now he knows Texas is big. He could have also just looked at a souvenir mug. It says it right there. Everything's bigger in Texas, including floods. But does Texas do disaster recovery well? Because that's what the Trump regime would like, for states to handle all disaster relief and recovery and for the federal government to play no role. And if it's in the hands of the states, you'd assume they might spend money on it. And yet, just a few months ago, Texas legislators shot down a bill that would have created a new government council to establish the emergency response plan and administer the grant program, both of which would have been aimed at facilitating better communication between first responders. The bill also called for the plan to include the use of outdoor warning sirens, like those used in tornado-prone Texas counties, and develop new emergency alert systems. Legislators, however, thought the price tag was too expensive, at $500 million. Remember, this is the same body that approved an $11 billion program called Operation Lone Star, which is basically an immigrant hunting program that has turned the state police into military units and uses mass AI surveillance to lock up women selling tamales. Of course, even if the legislation would have passed then, it wouldn't have saved lives so quickly, a fact many are now using to get out of accountability. But Texas already has some flood funds, but they're kind of just sitting there. $54 billion in flood projects are waiting to be built, and state legislators have only dedicated a small fraction of that funding so far. Texas also has a grant program to help counties out with their flood preparedness. Kerr County, where the floods hit the hardest, applied for them at least 3 times, and all 3 times they were rejected by Texas state officials. Even if they had approved it, the state fund only pays for 5% of the costs, and what it does pay for must be paid back by counties. It's pretty ruthless. So what did the larger-than-Spain state decide to spend its money on in its whopping $338 billion budget they passed earlier this year, instead of, let's say, flood warning systems? $51 billion in new property tax breaks. You know, for the people who own property. Hell, maybe 2, 3 properties, not counting all the properties underwater. How much would the Kerr County warning system, like a siren, have cost? $1 million. One whopping $1 million. Look, I'm no expert, but maybe homeowners might be able to protect their now taxless properties better if they did pay a little more in taxes to fund a system that could tell them when the flooding was coming to said properties. But I don't know, I don't own properties. Despite the glaring underspending on disaster preparedness in favor of a militarized, anti-immigrant state with low taxes, all Governor Greg Abbott wants to do is stop playing the blame game and start playing the football game.
You ask, I'm going to use your words. Who's to blame? That's the word choice of losers. Every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame. The championship teams are the ones that say, don't worry about it, man, we got this. We're going to make sure that we go score again, that we're going to win this game. The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions. Oh, here's a solution. Roll yourself into the sea. Ah, I already did an into the sea joke. Here's a solution. Fund your flood systems properly. Because if Texas lawmakers are a football team, and floods, fires, and ice storms are in the league, Texas is painfully outmatched. Why do you think one of your teammates keeps on leaving the field for Cancun or Greece? Cruz knows he's a loser. Oh, but the blame continues. So let's keep spreading it out. After all, children are dead. Kerr County has known about the flooding risks of the Guadalupe River for decades. It is, after all, in what's called Flood Alley, kind of on the nose. So what have leaders done there to mitigate the risk to residents? Very little. And on July 4th, 2025, Kerr County's inaction proved to be deadly. While a lot has been made of the National Weather Service being hollowed out by Trump, which it is, it seems like on the night of July 4th, meteorologists on call did alert Kerr County officials at around 1:30 in the morning of flash flooding. And there was no response. Not until 5:30 in the morning did the Kerr County Sheriff's Department warn residents via Facebook. You know, the place where you share Epstein memes and sell used high chairs. Yeah. There were other tools they could have used, though. The Washington Post revealed that Kerr County could have alerted all residents by blasting Amber Alert-style messages to every device. But they chose not to, not until 2 days later. Now, maybe they didn't want the sound of the alarms bothering people, because for a decade, Kerr County officials have waffled on installing a siren system to warn people of flash floods. And during a 2016 meeting, one of Kerr County's then commissioners, a man named H.A. or Buster Baldwin, had a particular concern, saying, "The thought of our beautiful Kerr County having these damn sirens going off in the middle of the night, I'm gonna have to start drinking again to put up with y'all." Oh, you'll be drinking, but it won't be whiskey. Look, I hate sirens too, okay? They ruin my recordings, they wake up the baby, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that sirens are usually a good thing, because usually it means someone's getting help, and that's a good thing, right? The problem is, since the state of Texas underfunds their flood preparedness, it often falls to counties and voters to agree to pay more taxes to fund them. But according to Kerr County's most senior elected official, Judge Rob Kelly, taxpayers won't pay for it. Again, we're talking $1 million. What are you doing? No, we're not. No, don't do that joke. No, that joke is so old. You don't, 1 million. No, it's corny. And how old are you? You're old. That is, nobody knows what that is. Stop. And here's where it gets even worse. Because even when the money was there, Kerr County officials refused to put flood warning systems into place. While the state of Texas might have rejected Kerr County's request for flood warning system money, guess which sugar daddy stepped in? Sleepy Joe. That's right. Back in 2021, under Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan, Kerr County got $10 million to put towards storm-related infrastructure. Remember,
It was just $1 million. Stop. But there was a problem. You see, Kerr County went to Trump 3 times, and neither officials nor voters liked the idea of using Biden money to live.
This ARPA money is the most dangerous thing and possibly ever in the history of America and could destroy our beautiful country.
This slides us from socialism, Marxism, and straight into communism, all by design. Accepting and using any of these funds puts us all under the boot of federal tyranny.
We want you to send it back. The Biden regime has proven to be tyrannical and anti-American. There is no part of this administration that has the good of America or Americans at heart. We want no part in anything coming down from the federal government. This is Texas, and Texans can take care of Texas.
Trump country didn't want Biden's dirty dollars, the one that Stalin and Mao crumpled up to stuff in his little thong while he danced for their pleasure with his liver spots gyrating. Kerr County officials then spent the money on what most counties, liberal or conservative, spend money on: cops. And voters were kept safe from the waggling teat of Joe Biden's government. Everyone except the kids that drowned. Now let's talk about those kids and how Camp Mystic failed them wildly. Because there's someone who did get the 1 a.m. National Weather Service notification of flash flooding, and that was the camp's director, Dick Eastland. And yet, he didn't give orders to evacuate his campers for a whole hour. And look, I get it. You're tired, you're dealing with hormonal 6th graders, and somehow the $7,600 each family pays to attend your camp for 4 weeks just doesn't go as far as it used to. So you pop a NyQuil and oops. As a likely result of his inaction, 27 campers and 1 counselor died in the floods, including, oh yeah, Dick Eastland. Now, he's been painted as a hero because he died trying to save some of the girls at Camp Mystic, but let's unpack that. Because Eastland knew very well of the dangers of having a summer camp in Flood Alley. This isn't the first time that young campers were killed in floods. In 1987, 10 teens died in a flash flood at another nearby Christian camp. And the next year, 2 brothers also died at a separate camp from floods. Even before that, in 1985, Dick Eastland got personal insight into the dangers of the river when his own pregnant wife and camp co-director, Tweety, I told you Tweety was coming, this is the Tweety part, when Tweety had to be airlifted from Camp Mystic to the hospital to give birth because of flash flooding. And they still didn't install a warning system. Yeah, but Tweety, she's a bird, so she just flew up into the sky. Her water broke in midair, too. We thought it was rain. Instead, the camp took even greater risks. In 2013, Camp Mystic petitioned FEMA to exempt 15 of its structures from flood regulations, and in 2019 and 2020, petitioned to exempt 15 more. In other words, cabins and facilities were allowed to be built just feet above the water line of the river, and in some cases, even below flood lines, in order to avoid the costs of flood insurance or appropriate building codes. A Christian camp. I mean, is it godly to be this f***ing reckless? Jeff Carr, a spokesperson for Camp Mystic, confirmed via email to the Washington Post that the camp had made appeals to FEMA and that they were approved, quote, just as 90% of all such appeals are approved by FEMA. In other words, blame FEMA. And the human centipede of blame is complete. Now, all of this failure is obviously against the backdrop of this not being the 1980s, but 2025, when severe weather like flash flooding is getting worse by the year, by the month, by the hour, thanks to the effects of climate change, something that Republican leaders in Texas don't even believe exists.
Are you concerned about climate change?
We constantly focus on issues such as extreme weather, and we want to be prepared for whatever type of weather may be coming our way.
Can you even say climate change? Can you even say that?
I love this reporter. Can you even say climate change should be the normal person's "what is a woman" question? Texas not only is a place obsessed with tax cuts to the detriment of things like flood warning and prevention systems, but is also a leader in greenhouse gas emissions. Because of its reliance on the oil and gas industry, it's the state with the most CO2 emissions by far. And heaven forbid companies pay for the price of the destruction that emissions cause, or I don't know, aren't subsidized to the tune of $1.8 billion a year, or roughly $170 per Texas household. No, it's Texas. Oil, baby. Not only is climate change getting worse, but we've got this guy. A man who, while people's babies were drowning under floodwater, danced, played golf, and ate ice cream the entire weekend. And when he finally did visit Kerr County, where again, bodies are still being recovered, he made it all about the 1-year anniversary of him nearly dying.
It's hard to believe a year is up, and here we are. A lot of things have happened since then, including the presidency. So, I have an obligation to do a good job, I feel, because I was really saved. I was really saved by somebody very special.
Somebody very special. I won't name names, just like the Epstein client list. God, I hate when Trump tries to be religious. It's like watching a cat try to swim. Now, the National Weather Service managed to do its job to the best of its ability in Texas, despite Trump. But that may not last for long, because the big fugly bill includes cutting the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which houses the National Weather Service, by 27%. That includes NOAA's National Severe Storms Lab in Oklahoma, which specifically improves flash flood warnings. It'll mean fewer weather balloons monitoring fast-moving weather systems, and fewer meteorologists up in the middle of the night who can sound the alarm. In April, Trump ended the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities program, effectively killing $3.3 billion in grants for different climate preparedness projects across the country, a program that Trump himself started back in 2018. Once again, Trump being undermined by past presidents, also named Trump. And despite just 9% of Americans who want FEMA to be eliminated, the regime marches on, cutting FEMA staff by 20%, forcing career employees into taking those Doge buyouts, and leaving the rest to not get in David Richardson's way. 20 states are currently suing the government over these FEMA cuts, and yes, only Congress can decide whether to fully eliminate the body, but given what we just saw happen with the Supreme Court allowing for mass layoffs at the Department of Education, we no longer live in a country with equal branches of government. We live in a Stephen Miller snow globe made up of dandruff and daddy issues. What played out in Texas on July 4th is going to keep playing out to worsening degrees as climate change gets worse, agencies are defunded, and politicians continue to wash their hands. And I'm not saying that blue states are stellar when it comes to saving lives, but to say these failures are not on residents of deep red counties would be a lie. It is on voters to both boot their reckless officials, but also recognize that taxes exist for a reason, to contribute to things like flood warning systems and climate preparedness for your community. Yet the entire conservative mindset and the media that props it up is allergic to the idea of belonging to community or a collective. It's rugged individualism and low taxes, even if the price is death, your own or your children. And I guess the fact that the victims of such sweeping political failure were children is what really pisses me the f*** off, because they can't vote. And while their parents might think that climate change is a hoax made up by Nancy Pelosi to finance the animatronic version of Joe Biden, they want to live. And many residents who lost everything in the floods are rebuilding right back along the river, in part because Texas zoning laws when it comes to flood zones are so lax, or so abundant, as Ezra Klein might say. Funny, I haven't heard much from the abundance guys in the wake of these floods. Oh well, deregulate on. So unless you're rich enough to have your own private weather balloon and private siren systems and private rescue helicopters, which I'm sure Uber will be rolling out any minute now, please understand that until we start investing in our communities, we're gonna be left behind. When will Republican voters finally get that they're being played? The White House will pass the buck. Federal agencies will pass the buck. State officials will pass the buck. County officials will pass the buck. Camp leaders will pass the buck, and it will be you left with the bill or the body. Thank you so much for watching the Bitchuation Room's deep dive, long forms, these exhaustive pieces. I am sweating. You do not want to smell me right now. If you like what you see, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/bitchuationroom. It allows me and my team to do this. Shout out to Brent Godin and Paige Omek and Andy Vasoyan for their support. Also, if you're not subscribed to this channel, what are you doing? Subscribe right now and make sure to catch our Tuesday shows streaming live every 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And I will see you next time.